This episode is sponsored by Honeybadger. Did you know that downtime can get really expensive? On average, small businesses lose about $427 per minute when their systems are down. And for medium-sized businesses, it can be as high as $9,000 a minute. That adds up fast. That's where Honeybadger comes in. It helps you stay ahead of issues by combining error tracking, performance monitoring, uptime monitoring, and more, all in one simple platform. That means you can fix problems faster and avoid costly downtime before it impacts your business. Best part? It's free to get started, and setup takes as little as 5 minutes. So if you haven't already, bookmark honeybadger.io, that's honeybadger.io, and keep your business running smoothly. In this episode, we're going to be doing something really cool. So in this example application, we have two different things. We have music and we have posts. Posts is simply just a blog post area, but what we're going to be focusing on is this music. And the basis of this episode is when you're playing audio on one page and you navigate away, a lot of times the audio will stop playing. But with using some stimulus controllers, we could actually persist that, so no matter what page we navigate to, it'll still play the music. So for example, I'll click play on this first one. We get this nice banner at the bottom with the music playing. And now I'm going to go over to the posts. I'm going to create a new post. We'll just put in test and we'll create the post. We did navigate away from that page, but we see that the music is still playing. And when we go to create the post, it is making a post request. We'll see that the music still plays again. We can even destroy this post and it's still playing the whole time through. Of course, if we were to do a page refresh, then it will stop playing as one would expect. And so in this episode, we're going to look at how we can do this in not only a maintainable way, but in a way that's also unobtrusive and also without bringing in any external libraries. And so to get started in our terminal on a fresh Rails 8 application, I'm going to run the Rails action_text:install to install action text. And then I'm going to generate a few different scaffolds. We'll have one for our post, which is going to have a title, and also the content will make the rich_text. And then we'll generate another scaffold, and this is going to be for our music. And let's just have a title, and then we'll have a file. In that data type, we're going to make an attachment. And by making an attachment, that is going to make it a has one attached in the model. So it sets all of that up for us. We'll go ahead and run the Rails db migrate to migrate our database. And then in the layouts, I'm just going to go into my navigation links, and I'm going to create a few different links for our new models. So we'll have our music, and we'll just take that to the music's path. And then we'll have our posts, and we'll take that to the posts path. And in the music index, let's just create a play button. So we can make this an audio tag, and we want to get the URL for, and we'll pass in the music.file. And we only want to do this if the music file is attached. Oh, and this does need to be URL for, but if the music file is attached, then we also want to check if the music file is in audio. But once that's done, we can go ahead and start up our Rails application with the bin dev, and let's go ahead and create some music. So I'll just create one called no music, just to make sure that it works, and that does. So now let's go ahead and create another one. So I'll just drag up a file, give it a title, we'll create the music, we'll go back to our show page, and we don't see anything because we do have to enable the controls. So in our audio tag, we can add the controls and set that equal to true. Once we say this, we can then go back, and now we have the controls. So we can play this, and the audio will play as we would expect. But the problem is, as soon as we navigate away from this page, if we go to our post, the music stops playing. And so that's where we need to make it outside of that page. But there's a lot of problems with that. And one issue is that if we were to create a stimulus controller for just this, when we click play, then it'll start playing, but we're not going to be able to target anything outside the stimulus controller. And so when we add the bottom part, we basically need to make that permanent. So regardless on what page we're on, for a turbo request, it's not going to re-render a page, removing it. And there is a way that we're able to do that, and that is with stimulus outlets. I have covered stimulus outlets in the past, but I think having a refresher on this is important, and this is a great use case for it, where we are wanting to interact with a different stimulus controller. So we're going to create two different stimulus controllers, one for the button that's going to play the audio, and then another for the sticky banner that will actually display and play the audio. So let's go ahead and generate our stimulus controllers. For the button, I'm just going to call that the track controller, and then we'll generate another one, and that's going to be for the music_player. And the cool part about this is we're not going to need anything else, just these two stimulus controllers and the view markup. So for the player, it's really up to you where you want to put that, but I'm going to put it in the application HTML ERB, and I'm going to put it at the end of the body. So we'll have a div with a data-controller, and this is going to be for our music-player. Because we are using stimulus outlets, we do need an ID element that we're going to be able to reference. So we'll call this the music player. And don't forget, we do want to call the data turbo permanent, just so we're going to be able to keep this stimulus controller between page refreshes. And then we're going to add some classes. Because we're wanting this to be anchored at the bottom, we can do a fixed bottom -0. We can then do a left -0, a right -0. Let's give it a background gray of 900. We will make our text white. We'll give it some padding, and then we'll make it a flex box, centering the items with a justify between, and we'll also make it hidden. So if you haven't noticed, I am using Tailwind on this application, but you're going to be able to do something very similar with Bootstrap or some custom CSS. And then we need to have a span. So when we play the music, we want the title of that song to show up here. And so we're going to need a data music player target. And this music player target, we'll just call the title. And we'll give this some class. We'll make it a text large, and we'll make it a bit bold. So with a font, semi-bold. We'll close out this tag, and then we'll have one for the audio. We're going to have something very similar with the data music player target, but instead of title, we want to make this our audio. We also want to show the controls, and then let's give this a class. We'll make it a bit wider, so a W full, and we'll give it some left and right margin. And so for this stimulus controller for the music player, we have two targets, and we're going to be able to interact with these through a different stimulus controller via the stimulus outlets. So on the index page where we had this audio tag, instead of an audio tag, we want this to just be a button. And this button, we'll give it some class. We'll just give it a text blue of 600 and a hover of a text blue, and let's make it a bit darker with an 800. And I'll use an emoji in the play text, and then we can close out this button. And so basically, we need to create a stimulus controller around this. So we can add our data controller, and we're going to make this for the track. This stimulus controller, we also need to grab a few different things. We need to get the URL and also the title, which we can simply add this in with the data-audio URL, and we can set this equal to, and then we'll insert in some ERB tags, the URL for, and the music.file. We're going to do something similar for the title, and we'll just reference the music.title. Now you are able to use some stimulus values, and that could be a better fit here, but I also like just using data attributes because they're really easy to work with. But then to kind of tie this all in together, we need to have a data track music player outlet, and then we need to reference the ID element of our music player. So we'll use the hash music player, and again, that is the exact same ID element that we had for the music player stimulus controller. But let's take a look at the makeup of this data attribute. This is a data attribute for the data controller track. We then have a music player outlet, and then we're setting that equal to the ID element. And so that's going to be really important because we're going to be able to target this music player ID when we click on this button. So we do need to add a data action to this button. And basically when we click on it, we want to call the track, and we need to create a function. Let's just call play. Because we do have a button here, we do want the prevent default, which we could add in that play function, or we can call the colon and then prevent, and that's going to do the exact same thing. So believe it or not, our view is all done. The only thing we have to do now is set up the stimulus controllers. For the stimulus controller, for the music player, let's tackle that one first. We'll have a static targets, and remember, we have two different targets. We have the audio, and we also have the title. We really don't need the connect function, but we do need a different function to play the music. And we can call this audio target, and we can simply just call .play on there, and then that'll play the music. We also need to call this element, and we want to get the class list, and we want to remove the hidden. So that way it would then become visible. And so let's leave this alone for now, and let's go into our track controller. We do need to define a static outlets, and we're going to set this equal to the name of the stimulus controller, that is the music-player. We're not going to do anything in a connect function, but we are going to have a play function, and this is where we want to call this music player outlet, and we can do different things. We can call the audio target source is equal to this element data set, and then we can get our audio URL. And we're going to do something very similar for the title, but instead of the source, we want to get the text content, and we can set that equal to the audio title. And remember, this data set is coming from our index action where we had that data audio URL and the audio title. And of course, we want to only do this if the music file is attached and if it is an audio. Otherwise, we're probably going to run into a lot of problems. But back in the track controller, we just have one more thing that we need to do. We need to call this music player outlet, and remember, we had a function called play music. Again, that's just going to grab our audio element, and it's going to hit play, and it's also going to make the entire div visible. So we do need to call this play music with empty parentheses. And so we can come back, we'll refresh the page, and now let's try hitting the play button. And so we now have our music playing. We can navigate to different posts. We can create a new post, and the whole time the music is still playing. So this works and it's really good. And so there are a few different things that you could do. If you didn't want to do it like this, and instead you want to call this music player outlet, and on the play music function, if you then want to pass the audio target and also the title, we can do that as well. That does mean in our music player controller, we do need to take in our source and the title, which I'll leave this in for option 1 also. So when we take in our source and title, we can then call this audio target source is equal to our source, and this title target and the text content will set equal to the title. We'll then play and then show the element as we normally would. And so coming back, we can refresh the page, we can click play, and it still works just the same. And so it's really up to you which way you want to go. Personally, I like doing it the first way, but I understand how that can be a bit confusing because now you're interacting with targets on that other stimulus controller. So I do think that this approach may be a bit cleaner, where you're just passing the data over to a different stimulus controller, and then you're allowing this stimulus controller to do what it wants with that information. And overall, that's going to give you a need functionality where you're then anchoring this down at the bottom of the page without having to obtrusively modify other parts of your application. For example, in the old days, before we had stimulus outlets, you would probably have to do something up in the HTML tag where you edit a stimulus controller for the player, just so everything was scoped within that stimulus controller, and I really don't like that. I think this floating music player is a perfect use case example for a stimulus outlets. Well, that's all for this episode. Thanks for watching.